because it is the first free market system in the world that is decentralized, not controlled by any person, by any government.
You don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. You can buy, like to the $50 of a Bitcoin, you can still get the same benefits.
Well, hey everyone, welcome into Pushing the Limits. Today I have a fantastic guest for you. I have Paul Quickendon, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Easy Crypto. Welcome to the show, Paul. Fabulous to have you. So whereabouts are you sitting today?
I'm based in Auckland.
Yep.
We're a business that's full-time remote, so I work from home most of the time. But yeah, generally based in Auckland.
Yeah, brilliant. Isn't that remote working just gold that you can do this sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I've been a customer of Easy Crypto for quite a number of years. I think what must be going on 5-6 years now.
Yeah.
And we love your exchange. We're very grateful that you and Janine and Alan made this wonderful exchange for us to have an on and off ramp, so to speak, into the crypto world.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share today a little bit of the story behind Easy Crypto, but then also talk generally about the digital space and what we need to be thinking about in the coming times, because we're sort of living through some pretty extraordinary historic times, really. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Paul, and about Easy Crypto.
Sure. So like I said, I live in Auckland, father of three, so fairly busy life. Been working at Easy Crypto for 4 years and was working for another blockchain/crypto businesses for a couple of years before that. And then prior to that, I spent a lot of time working in Spark/Telecom, doing product management and strategy and roles like that. Inevitably, that's like, well, how did you get into crypto? And it's a great question, and everyone's induction is always unique. For me, it was a good friend of mine who I used to work with in Spark. He was already working for my previous employer. He said, "Hey, there's a job." I didn't know anything. I'll be honest, I didn't know anything about it other than I heard a bit about Bitcoin and that sort of stuff, and then really went down the rabbit hole there for 2 years, and it was an incredible organization for learning about blockchains and crypto and tokenomics, and how this alternate financial system was kind of getting started at the time. And then since then, the last 4 years I've had various roles inside of Easy Crypto, doing strategy work, and then picked up the New Zealand business when Janine became the group CEO. And then we've announced that there was a sale happened on the 1st of April this year. And so I was kind of running things in the background while Janine was focusing on the sale. So I've been running the Easy Crypto business now for over a year.
Wow.
And and at the moment, we're about to join. As you can see, we're powered by SwiftX at the moment,
Yes.
and we will be becoming SwiftX, in a reasonable time going forward. So just kind of working through that project with SwiftX, who are the new owners.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've been involved with SwiftX as well. So great that you're going to be able to extend some of the services maybe. And Easy Crypto has also been in Australia, in South Africa, as well as New Zealand. And it's provided a really, for the Southern Hemisphere people, if you like, a way into this ecosystem that otherwise wouldn't have really been so easy, or we would have paid a lot more fees and had a harder time. So it's been a really important journey, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and it's really remarkable because when you get together with the SwiftX founders, and had been lucky enough to meet them, the genesis story for that business and Easy Crypto is almost identical.
Wow.
Both came into the market at a time when Australia, in their case, and New Zealand were paying significant premiums just to get access to the same assets, Bitcoin and Ethereum and all that sort of stuff, sort of like 15-20% more. And
Wow.
and both groups of founders just went, "That's not right. We think this future should be democratized." And so both set out to build affordable access to the ecosystem. And we do things a little bit differently, but the reason for being for both businesses is absolutely the same. And we care immensely about people getting into the ecosystem. We both spend a lot of time on education and supporting people on that journey because it's new.
Oh, yeah.
It's different, and you have to learn about technology, we've got our own language, we've got our own technology, we've got our own wallets, all of those things. And so, we both spend a lot of time and effort in that part of the ecosystem, and both feel very proud that, we've onboarded, well over 1 million combined,
Wow.
to the ecosystem, and we continue to focus on that.
That's huge. That's amazing growth. And like for me, like I came to crypto, if you like, so like 6 years or so ago, or 5, 6 years ago. And it was at a time when, we were going through the big viral pandemic. And I was seeing things that I didn't really like, and the overreach and, control and lack of faith in authorities, shall we say. And that's what sort of sparked my interest in the whole crypto world and being self-sovereign. I've been an advocate of self-sovereignty for health for over a decade because I've, unfortunately had some pretty horrific experiences in the medical world, and now work in that space. And my listeners know my story. And so I've always been about prevention, about health optimization, and all of that. And then came, when the big pandemic came, and we saw some of the things that I wasn't liking either in the authoritarian space and the government space. That sort of opened my eyes to what crypto was, because up until that point, I've just heard about Bitcoin. I had no idea what it was about and why. And, most people today still, a lot of people don't. They've heard
Yeah.
about it and they don't know what it is. There's the old view that it's for criminals, even though we've got BlackRock and Fidelity and, governments involved now, it's still got that connotation of it was sort of for the black market, way back in the beginning. And, for me, I think this was a paradigm shift, a huge paradigm shift. And I think for a lot of people, that's going on right now for people, that they're sort of just waking up to debasement of the currency, printing going on everywhere. We can all feel it, that the inflation is high, that our wages are not keeping pace, that there's something wrong with our system. What would you say to that? So is that a sort of typical origin story into the Bitcoin world or into the crypto world?
Yeah, look, it certainly was in the early days. It was, the Genesis coin was Bitcoin, and that it's no coincidence came about after the global financial crisis.
Yeah.
And, whoever Satoshi is, and we don't know, but whoever
Mhm.
Satoshi is, didn't like what they saw in that period of time where, institutions should have been allowed to fail. They weren't. Losses were socialized. That means the public picked them up.
Government took them
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Balance sheet.
Well, it wasn't I mean, the government is us.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so we end up picking up the losses, and and some of those businesses have now become the biggest banks in the world, and so I didn't really like that, and so a big part of the early journey was building a system that was outside of that, and able to be controlled by the likes of you and I, and do it in a semi-anonymous way. Crypto has this reputation of being completely anonymous. It's really, really not.
No.
And the best crime-fighting institution in crypto, the Secret Service, loves blockchains because they can read them
You
like
can see
every other block.
everything you
Yeah,
do.
yeah. So there is certainly limits to that anonymity. But the key point is that it gave people trust in what they were owning. It gave people, because you're effectively trusting in software, not in politicians whose whims change, not in central banks who do what they do. And so it gave people trust in what they were owning. And then a whole bunch of benefits from the technology started to be explored. We're tokenizing real estate at the minute. So that means, if you can't
That's
buy a house, you can own a fraction of a house, for instance.
yeah.
And that's a cool piece of the future of our ecosystem. But we're also seeing people who felt like they were being excluded from, because you're getting this really big disparity between the haves and the have-nots, and it continues on. And, we call it inequality, but that's effectively what's going on.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of people, my son's 19, he feels it intensely. He's like, I'll never be able to buy a house in Auckland. It's just too much. And
Exactly.
but their dreams and their hopes are exactly the same as the generations before them. They want financial freedom. They want to make their life better. And so with the advent of, technologies like blockchain and the internet, they're able to research up alternative assets and how they can invest and, change their lot in life. And so that's another part of it. And because I agree, one of your statements before was there is certainly a lessening of faith in what has worked. And, as we always have to evolve, it's, one of those immutable laws of life on this planet. And, you could argue that we did have a financial system up to maybe 1975 that kind of
Yeah.
worked.
Mm.
And then something really changed. And, there's graphs in health, there's graphs in finance, there's graphs in a whole bunch of other things that show that right then, in that period, somewhere between 1970 and 1975, there's a real
Mm.
tipping point for a whole bunch of things. And now we've got, obesity, we've got Alzheimer's, we've
Exactly.
got massive wage disparity. CEOs used to earn 3 or 4 times what their average employee does. Now it's hundreds of times. Like
So,
that's the
yeah.
problem. And this thing that I work in, this industry I work in, is we believe it's part of the solution.
Mm.
And there's other, you're deeply into the other parts of the ecosystem, but that's kind of what's going on. And so, for me, it's no surprise that someone who's, been challenging one part of the establishment and what's going on
Yep.
can easily find echoes in our part of the world, because that's a similar type of story that's going on. Currencies aren't worth what they were. Algorithms are a wonderful thing. Once you start looking for stuff, you get more and more stuff. You should challenge what you're seeing on social media always, but
Yep.
you just start seeing what currency debasement actually is. You see what inflation is doing to our earnings. It's hard.
Yeah.
Once you've seen it, it's hard to unsee.
It's hard to unsee. It's like for me, it was like breaking of a paradigm. It really is about breaking of a paradigm. The last 10 years basically have been one broken paradigm after another. But it's fantastic that we have this, and so thank goodness for Satoshi and the early cryptographers who made this
Yeah,
who saw this coming and saw this. And I'm a student now of monetary history and really trying to understand how did we get here, right? Reading books like The Bitcoin Standard or Broken Money by Lynn Alden, or The Price of Tomorrow, which is a fabulous book, Jeff Booth, Larry Lepard, the Big Print, these types of books that explain to you how we got here. Like really starting, well, 5,000 years of monetary history,
yeah,
what we use this money, and then understanding what money is, because we've been born, you and I have been born into a world where it was already existed, and we only knew one thing. This was it, right? We've never seen change in our lifetimes until now. Like we're starting to see
yeah,
change. And so it's very hard for us to wrap our heads. I mean, humans find it difficult to wrap their heads around exponential technologies, and that's what we're experiencing right now with AI and with crypto. And just understanding that throughout monetary history, all of the currencies, all of the empires have broken on this, on the inflation side of the equation. If you look right back to Rome,
yeah,
and certainly since the World War One, when England, the Bank of England, which was sort of the power at the time, started to take everything off the gold standard in order to print for the upcoming war, and then never went really back on the gold standard, was the sort of the beginning of the end. And then, in the 1930s, where the American president took all the gold, there's and just gave everybody paper money. And then, of
yeah,
course, in 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold standard in America, which really was the final nail in the coffin, basically. And we've lived still another 50 years now on from that, but things are accelerating. Feels to me like debasement is accelerating, wages are going down relative terms, for purchasing power. Inflation, they're saying, is at 2 to 3%, but debasement really is going at, in my opinion, 12% a year. So that means if you're an average wage earner, you're sort of, we can debate the figures, but it's a lot. The
you tell
average
your
wage
father of three,
earners,
it hurts, right?
it's hurting,
It hurts.
right? Yeah, exactly.
So, and I often think about this, that we've talked about, or some people would say we've been lied to. It doesn't matter, but we talk about inflation like things are getting more expensive, but actually what's happening is what we have, the money we get paid for our jobs has less buying power.
Yeah.
That is debasement. The house stays the same. The thing that we're paying for the house is getting devalued.
Yeah.
And when you see that, that's the part that really hurts. And we've got shrinkflation, and there's all sorts of marketing games that are going on that are costing us more. But I don't know. I don't know if you do your own shopping, if you can
Yeah.
believe that the inflation rate is running at 2 point whatever it is, like the
No.
butter's at 30%. It's
I
like
know, butter's $11
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
pound of
yeah.
butter. Like, come on,
And I don't want to talk about Buttergate or whatever they're calling it now, but the whole point of it is that in terms of the real stuff, that's the bit that's really starting to bite.
Yep.
And and it's wonderful for people to say save for your retirement. Yes, it's a great thing to do, but
Not in cash.
yeah, a lot of people haven't got a lot left over anymore, and that's the point. And
No.
if wages aren't keeping up with real inflation, whatever the good measure of real inflation is, then we are going backwards. And as as a household, and there's a lot of I live in New Zealand. There's a lot of ongoing discussion about how productivity in New Zealand isn't growing like other peer nations.
Yeah.
And we kind of blow that off, but it should be really concerning because the productivity is the thing that lifts how much companies make, and how much companies make lifts how much we get paid. And so, relative to the rest of the world, we're getting poorer as well.
Yep.
And, my opinion is that the best barometer for that is what happens to our young people. And our young people are signaling with their feet and their passports. They're leaving, and that's really
Tragic.
sad. It's really concerning, and it's not good for our future. Like because they are the ones with hope. They're the ones with more energy than people my age. They're the
Yeah.
ones that are going to be able to drive the economy forward, and they're doing it for other nations, not us.
Exactly. And we've they've been educated here, grown up here, and then we're losing them. And then,
Yeah,
it, and it's quite tragic. Like you say, your son's generation, they're not even thinking that it's possible to ever get a house unless they're in the crypto world,
yeah,
where the CAGR on Bitcoin for the past, what is it, 15, 16 years has been phenomenal. And yeah, past is not indicative of future, but we're pretty damn sure that the CAGR is going to be pretty damned high. At least I'm betting on that.
yeah,
Way outstripping the inflation. And when you look at like things like the S&P 500, if you're invested in the S&P 500, you might be treading water if you're. And I follow Geordie Visser a lot. I don't know if you know Geordie Visser. He's a macro analyst, 30-year Wall Street veteran, fabulous guy to follow.
mhm,
Had him on the show recently, and he's the S&P is dead. Like in the next 4 or 5 years, many of those companies are going to go out of business. And we're seeing a changing of the guard. We've got all these private companies that aren't even on the public companies, the likes of, I don't know, SpaceX and things like that, that are huge. ChatGPT, all of these things, and they're private companies, so you're not even getting access to them.
yeah,
And this is where tokenization comes in, because that's cool. We are going to be able to access them, so we can talk about that shortly. But you're just coming back to this major shift in when you look at the books by Jeff Booth and Larry Lepard, the rich are getting richer, like the top 1%, really. And if you look through COVID, and there's American statistics, but they printed 40% of the total monetary supply within 2 years and put it into the system. Where did that money end up? In the top 1% of the population, not in the rest of the population, right? So they got really rich during COVID, the top 1%. The rest of the people got poorer. When you start to have this massive divide between the super billionaire rich people and the average person is getting, devalued, and we're not able to keep up, and we're working 3 jobs and we're struggling to make a living, there comes a point where you start to have an a revolutionary force
Mm.
come into the play, which is what's scaring me, right? When you can see it in places like New York now, with you've got this mayoral candidate who's very socialist and blatantly saying he's a socialist, and we should have he's selling it on bread lines, like we'll feed. Where do you think the money's coming from? And for me, this is a very dangerous political movement. As a kid who, I'm 56, grew up with, looking at communism as being not the optimal sort of a system, and democracy and capitalism certainly got its problems, but it's sort of the best of the lot, if you like. What frightens me is when people start to get angry, when people start to be not able to keep up, that causes this unrest in society. And traditionally, this is what's led to world wars, right? This is what's led to World War One, World War Two, Germany with Hitler, that populism that came out of that time after the Depression, when the people were hurting and starving, they would follow any leader, any dictator. It causes the rise of dictatorships.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is very deep, right? But this is the sort of the things that keep me up at night, because this is, I feel, where we're heading if we don't do something. And I'm hoping that, like, I see Bitcoin as, I'm hoping the future of the monetary system, like the backing of the monetary system. And we're a long way from there yet.
Yeah.
We're a tiny asset class, but that is my hope, that one day, because it is the first free market system in the world that is decentralized, not controlled by any person, by any government, and is just run by code. And that's a powerful force for good.
Yeah, and look, I agree, and a lot in what you've just said, and I think, my summary of that is history is a great pointer to the future. It doesn't have to be the exact, but I agree that there are echoes now of various times in history.
Yeah.
France in the late 1780s, early 19th century, 20th century, Europe, we're in that kind of cycle, and
Yeah.
sadly, it does look like this wonderful 100-year period of basically of fairly
Doing
limited
well.
global
Yeah.
wars is coming to an end. We're entering into a volatile period, and that will do what it does, and driven by multiple facets. Inequality certainly seems like one of it, in internal fractions, but we're also seeing changing weather patterns. So, access to food and water will also drive fractions on the edges of nations. That seems fairly obvious, and people will grasp for solutions. And the technology that I'm lucky enough to work with daily seems like it has a role in some of that.
Huge role.
Um,
Thank you.
so yeah. So look, don't want to be doomsaying, but it doesn't look as good as it used to, I guess, is the answer. And I'm also leaning towards the capitalism a way of solving this. I think it needs a little bit of a redo. Like, I think it's
Yeah.
been
Improvements.
yeah, like, I think I don't want to use the word corrupted, that's too strong, but I think it's been perverted into a direction that's not quite where it should be. And,
Mhm.
Henry Ford, for all his failings, understood that you needed a workforce, a workforce that to be happy and turn up and do things for you to be able to be productive. And that's not exploitive. That's a
Yeah.
very different thing. And I think we're
Yeah.
probably getting closer to the exploitive gaps.
We are.
And
We
so
are.
that's
Yeah.
the problem. Um, and well, I don't know. Like, I've tried to research what's the alternative to neoliberalism and all that sort of stuff. There doesn't seem to be any massive leading candidates, so it feels like somebody brave is going to have to put forward something and experiment and try it, and you're seeing some of
We're
that. Like,
seeing it.
the Nordic countries, we talk about them a lot, but they're quite different. They are socialist, but they're leveraging their national assets to build something new. That's a different
Mhm.
approach. You got China, that's a different approach. I think, coming back to New Zealand, I think one of the things that makes me a little bit sad about our current political environment is that lack of vision and leadership. Like,
Yes.
we're not
Yep.
talking about this future that's exciting, that gives people hope. And I know the politicians think they are, but it's not really there.
they're completely behind the eight ball.
Yeah,
Let's be honest. Like we need people like you in the government who actually understand this technology, you know, the vision. Like, where are we at? Like with New Zealand AI, crypto, New Zealand digital dollar, blockchain. You know, like we could be leading the world in this sort of stuff. We're a small country. We could be implementing fast and furious. We could be doing amazing things.
yeah.
We're not, as far
No,
as I can
and
see.
it's really interesting. Like I did a podcast for Blockchain New Zealand last week.
Hmm.
And Brian, one of the hosts, reminded me that at one time, like we were really close to doing that. Like Cryptopia, sadly gone out of business, but that was a top 20 trading venue globally.
Wow.
My previous employer was one of the leading companies that supported the ICO boom, and like we were the hub of that world. We got companies like Futureverse, who a couple of years ago was arguably the best and biggest NFT company on the planet, and VV, and
Wow.
so like we do have pockets of it, but I don't think it has the scale and the scope of the industry has been appreciated by, Parliament and governments and that sort of stuff. And I don't know if they understand where it's going in terms of vision and all that sort of stuff. Ironically, Donald Trump seems to have gotten it and uh,
Yeah.
and is driving through an agenda, and the 180 that's in terms of regulatory environment that's happened in the US is
So exciting. I
yeah, it
mean,
is.
the
It
change in
really is.
regulatory environment, you know, whether you like him or not,
Yeah.
the fact that he's put it such a good team together, people like David Sachs who really get AI and really get
Yeah.
crypto and really understand the power of this, and Besant and others that are captains of industry who know how to run things. That's to me exciting that the choke point, 2.0 is gone with the
Yeah.
past administration. And of course, it is the most biggest, powerful government in the world. And so
Yeah.
this leads the way for us. I hope that we, bringing the Genius Act, the Stablecoin Act, and all of these things could lay the regulatory framework, because we need the regulatory framework. We've been operating in America, especially under, is it legal, is it not legal? Nobody can tell us. People doing stupid stuff and getting away with it, other people not doing anything wrong and getting debanked, and
Yeah.
like it was just a complete and utter mess. And now America at least is going forward and putting it on the map. And the strategic Bitcoin reserve
Yeah.
talk, Cynthia Lummis, and what's going on there is super exciting. All of these things are exciting, because they do lead the way, whether we like it or not. America does something, we look,
Yeah.
it affects us. I don't see any sign of it here, though. I don't see any sign of it changing, the way we see things. And we seem to follow more the UK and Europe, which to me is horrifying. Um,
So I think we should acknowledge that the US hasn't got it perfect, but they've done a really good job. They're in that Pareto 80-20 kind of rule.
yep.
MICA doesn't seem to be working for Europe in terms of sustaining innovation, and they have an innovation problem. Their former EU Reserve Bank governor came out and said we've got an innovation problem.
Yep.
They seem desperately keen on over regulating themselves out of industry. That's kind of what they do. UK, I do think so. UK, let's be candid, Brexit was a financial disaster for them, and
Yeah.
so necessity drives innovation, and I firmly believe that. And so the UK, the FCA, which is the regulating body there, is being quite progressive. Is it ideal? No, but they're getting there really quickly, and they're showing a willingness to experiment and be nimble. I do think that having rules and regulations for exchanges is a good idea.
Oh,
if you
absolutely.
subscribe that people having, controlling people's wealth should be regulated, which I do,
Yep.
that's a good
Clear
outcome.
rules. Clear
Yeah,
rules.
clear
Everyone
rules.
knows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Australia and New Zealand do seem to be a little bit behind. Singapore has been quite progressive, but then kind of stopped. Like it evolved really quickly and got to a point, and I think they might just be waiting to see. Hong Kong has been, went from being ice cold on it to very aggressive on it in months. Like,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So they're opening up.
That's
So
exciting.
like there are and this is my message to the regulators in New Zealand, like there's now 6 or 7 different templates out there. And I know our financial regulation is different, every country's is, but there are models out there that you can see what's working and what's not. And don't relitigate it all. Just take some of the best practices out of it and give the industry some guidance.
Yes.
And on top of
Amen.
that, maybe have a look at some incentive-based regimes, rather than golden visas, other things that might come into play that
Exactly.
bring in businesses and startups to
And
drive.
bringing in money to the
Yeah,
ecosystem. Yeah, I
correct.
mean, brilliant, brilliant. Like if you bring in people that have that technology, that the backing, the money, the finances to bring in and start businesses here, because we desperately need that.
Yeah,
And we're a small country. We should be nimble. The bigger the country, the harder it is to get things moving, right?
yeah,
We're a small country of 5.5 million or whatever we are now. We should be able to act nimbly. We used to be able to. We were sort of leaders. Like I remember way back in the 80s when I was a kid, like we were the first with EFTPOS cards. We were,
yeah,
like we were ahead of the game. Now we seem to be like, there's not even talk. We're talking about the same issues in Parliament. You tune into Parliament and it's like, oh, we're still talking about the same thing, like there's no, and we're amidst, this is the other thing, Paul, is we're amidst the biggest revolution that the history has ever seen in technology with AI. Like
yeah,
this is massive. This is not a bubble. This is a massive change coming in here that is huge opportunity, huge scary stuff.
yeah,
This is like, we need to be talking about it. We need to be doing this better. Like when I look at the disruption that's coming to jobs. I mean, I run a couple of companies here. We're building agents. We're embracing it as fast as I can get my little head around,
yeah,
because I know if I don't, I am going to be left behind. Like there's all this opportunity, but there's also the fact that my competitors are not sitting on their asses and not doing anything.
yeah,
They're all doing it, so I have to do it. And that's, the way technology is. And the productivity gains that come through AI are huge. So profitability from these big companies, like when we're looking at the big tech giants, their profitability is going through the roof right now, and yet they're not putting on new staff. This is the first time that we've seen the separation between capital and labor, where like you're able to create more productivity, more profitability with less people. And that
yeah,
should be ringing the alarm bells, because all the administrative staff, even things like lawyers and accountants and teachers, and that all of them are going to be disrupted in the next 5 years. Nobody's talking about it. Massive changes coming. I see it in my little businesses, what I'm running. I'm racing flat tack to try to understand and get my head around it and implement it somehow in my business so that I don't go completely under.
yeah.
Uh,
Look, I think the numerous commentators have said that the AI strategy is pretty lightweight.
Yeah.
That came out of the government. It doesn't really provide strategic guidance, and is probably written by ChatGPT or something like that. Ironically. So look, it does.
Ironic.
Yeah, look, I think one of the listeners that or blogs that I really like is from Raoul Powell with Global
Yeah.
Macro Investor,
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
and
Well, yeah.
and and
Love his work.
his thesis around AI is very, very well articulated. It's going to be quite disruptive, and
Yep.
the thing that rings my bells is AI needs the future of money to be programmable. Like if we want
Yep.
commerce to be online, it needs
Yeah.
programmable money, and that's what I work in. That
Yes.
is what stablecoins are.
Yep.
So I think that future is very exciting, from just a commerce point of view. But if we don't get our head around it, like it will be, a big downward spiral. And
Yep.
yes, there are some industries that ironically won't be disrupted, and it's not software. It's going to be construction and.
Your builders will be okay for a while, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
electricians and
But I mean,
plumbers.
they'll get better, like their quoting and their accounts management. All those admin type things should be automated away with AI, and that's a really good thing, I think. Like they'd much rather not be doing that stuff. But I do agree. Like we do need to get our individually and as a nation our heads around this stuff, because it's not coming, it is here.
Mm.
You know, Sam Altman was online saying, you know, here are the three big things that worry me, and he's talking about, you know, future possible scenarios. Like he's leading it.
I know.
And you know, we've
Scary.
got I work in an industry where we have to manage and deal with fraud, and AI and fraud is a match made in heaven, and dealing with that for banks, for us, for every business is a real live challenge. You know, you cannot use your voice to authenticate people anymore. Like I'm online all
Yeah.
the time. That just makes no sense.
No.
No sense at all. And you know, the technology to forge whatever documents is just getting so much better, so much faster. You know, we will need to rapidly as a nation get around digital credentials and how we share that. And our view is that blockchains and cryptography have a really important role in that. And there's some good companies in New Zealand. Meta is working on that sort of stuff, which is outstanding.
Right.
But you know, we are entering into a new world, and you know, any one of these big breaks is massive winners and big losers, and you want to be on the right side of that. And I don't think we've quite got our head around it yet as a nation. That's the bit that needs a bit of a shove.
Yeah, we need to before we lose again. The middle classes are the ones going to be hit, right? When the
Yeah,
job losses start
yeah,
hitting, and when profitability from the bigger companies goes up, but we're not employing more people, where's the demand come from?
yeah.
GDP is going to drop through the floor, really, isn't it? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, like the future could be quite bleak. You know,
yeah,
I'm a perennial optimist. I have to be. I work in a
yeah,
sector that's been declared dead 150 times in the last 2 years or whatever it is. So,
yeah,
so I am a perennial optimist that a bunch of smart people won't rely on the government and get out and solve it and do what we need to do as a nation, um, and lead the way in that regard. I think it's fair to say we can't wait for the government to get its head around it. Like they're a big part of GDP, but they're not going to solve it. We're going to have to solve it in the private sector.
yep.
Um, you know, you're doing that already, which is awesome. Like that, I mean, fantastic. And you know, like again, like this is what I mean. Everyone's got a day job, but part of your day job is to make sure you're aware of what's happening and what's coming. And you know, you've identified AI in your sector and what it's doing. Fantastic. No, I'm very, very
Yeah,
impressed because I don't have that conversation with a lot of people. You know, even the banks are kind of saying, you know, we're going to use AI, but it's going to be our chatbots and answer our queries better. And I'm like, that's
uh,
not the future. The future is me talking to an AI that says, find me the best mortgage, you know,
exactly.
move my money into the highest bearing interest account. And it doesn't matter to me which bank it is, right? They're all regulated to a standard. Like banking is an absolute commodity. Like
Yep.
it's like water. Like there's a different flavor of water. I'm like, no, money is money. It is absolutely fungible.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
so that's the future in that regard, and I think those organisations really do need to get their head around what it could mean, and somebody will blink. Hopefully, it's a challenger bank, and you know, create some really compelling products that work with that future that is
And
coming.
how do we get people to, understand this? The average person, the average brain has got a busy life and they
Yeah,
haven't got time to spend 5 hours a day studying what the hell's going on in crypto and
yeah,
AI. Like it's really getting hard and almost impossible, even for people like you and me who, focused on this stuff to actually know what the hell's going on in the world. There's so much happening.
yeah.
It starts to go beyond the average intelligence's ability to take it on, right? Or not.
Yeah, well, it
You know what
does,
I mean?
but I mean, you've cited
Too.
some wonderful authors today,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm someone who reads, you know, online newsletters and blogs daily, you know,
Mhm.
and so that's for me how I stay abreast of the trends that are in my sector and what's going on. Um, Finding good, reliable, trustworthy news sources
Yeah,
is really,
that's
really
key.
cool. And you know, for me, it's um, you know, like I get this real buzz when I find a new author that really gets it, right? And you know, I've had the pleasure of meeting Dave Birch, who talks a lot about payments in person through Payments New Zealand, and then suddenly he starts putting out blogs about commerce and agentic AI, and I'm like, yeah, man, like you know
You're
it,
on
this
it.
is coming, and he, you know, like he puts out something every 3 weeks. So can I find 2 to 3 minutes every 3 weeks to stay up on that sort of stuff?
Yeah, yeah,
And
for sure.
maybe like a couple of minutes to kind of digest it. Yeah, I can do that. And so
Yeah,
those are the types of commitments. It's much better than, getting home and sitting and watching Instagram or whatever it is,
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
so that's how,
Absolutely.
we all have this ability to make choices about our time and where we put our effort, whether it's into our health and our fitness, into our learning, into our development. Like those are the things that'll make a difference. And that's why, there's I've got immense respect for some people. Darcy Ungara's been doing it for a long time, talking about Bitcoin and crypto. Luke and Keep the Change, he's a
Yeah, he's
real
coming on
challenger.
shortly. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
awesome.
awesome. Yeah, no, he's
Yeah,
a real challenger, and he is not everybody's cup of tea, because he is, if
he's great.
you're gonna listen to me, you're gonna pull up your bootstraps and get on with it.
Exactly.
You are the change, and
Yeah.
and that's affronting for people. Like, we're, as a nation, like, we're quite different from the US. The US would respond to that quite
Mm.
differently from, I think,
Oh,
our
is
culture.
that my problem? Some of the same milk.
Maybe, right? It may be, because
I'm like, come
I think,
on.
we call it tall poppy syndrome, but actually I think we're just really comfortable being comfortable.
Mm-mm.
And I'm a person, through my sporting antics and all that sort of stuff, that believes in being uncomfortable. Like,
Yes, like
you
me.
don't get, and I have amazing respect for your athletic career, right? But you don't get better by being comfortable. Your muscles get bigger when they get torn. How do you tear your muscles? Well, you have to lift heavy. You don't get fitter.
Exactly.
You don't get fitter by trundling around the block the same time. You've got to go harder and push yourself along. And
Mm.
mentally, you don't get smarter just by reading, the Herald and whatever it is. You have to go looking for the information to find um, alternate viewpoints that can challenge. And again, I mentioned Darcy because Darcy is a challenger in terms of thinking, and he's deliberate about it. And some of his stuff I listen to and I completely disagree with,
Mm.
but ultimately,
That's fine, eh?
yeah, but ultimately I'm
I love
thankful
that.
for the different viewpoint.
Yeah.
Um, and some of the stuff I wholeheartedly agree with. So, but that's, like, we live in this world where at the minute, everyone's got an opinion. We take that as truth. And I'm like, that's not actually how it works. For me, it's just different data points that I live with and don't live with, and can argue mentally with. I don't have to argue with them in person. It's too much energy, but it's like, I don't have to agree with everything. And I'm sure you hold some viewpoints that I don't subscribe to, and I know I will hold some that you don't subscribe to, and that's completely cool. But my hope is that by doing these types of things, that we challenge people's minds, have them thinking differently. Would I love you to become a customer of Easy Crypto and get into crypto and buy Bitcoin, or if they haven't, all that sort of stuff? Hell
Well,
yeah.
hell yeah, people, and
Oh, good.
check out the
But,
affiliate links down below because, like,
yeah.
seriously, like, this is like so important to get your head around it, get into this space.
Yeah, well, again, like, but if you don't, at least they've learned about currency debasement, and they've learned why this whole movement, which is now a $4 trillion industry, $4 trillion industry, is here. It's because it's responding to societal changes. It's because it's responding to a change that people don't really like. That's where it came from. And you're either part of it or you're not. And that's okay. Like, and the Bitcoiners used to have a really arrogant saying, it's like, have fun staying poor. That was how they used to respond to it. We're trying to get beyond that. Like, we want people to get some
Yeah.
exposure, understand how it works. When we say it's a store of value, what does that actually mean? Well, if you right now, short term, right now you live in Argentina and Turkey, like, it is an absolute store of value.
Yeah.
Just go to Google Finance, put it in the Turkish lira to the US dollar, Bitcoin, Turkish lira to the Bitcoin, and you'll see that people who have held Bitcoin for the last year in Turkey are
They're
better off
doing fine.
underlying.
And we are all in Turkey. We are all in Venezuela. We're just
Yeah.
on a slower time scale, right?
Mm.
We look at these hyperinflation
Yeah.
countries
Well,
and we
well
think,
put.
oh, well, they've got corrupt governments and they've got this. No, we are in the same boat. We are devaluing at a hell of a pace and it's picking up pace. And if you look at it in Bitcoin terms, like you would have seen all the graphs of, um, a house 5 years ago in Bitcoin terms would have been, I don't know, 300 Bitcoin and now it's 10, like whatever,
Yeah.
like the drop is huge. In other words, it used to cost you a lot. The house hasn't changed, but you're paying only, 5, 6, 10 Bitcoin for a house now, whereas you would have been, the value of that Bitcoin is going up, and it's stepping into a parallel system. And I really love Jeff Booth's work. Have you looked at Jeff Booth's work, The Price of
Yeah,
Tomorrow? Have you
I
read his
have.
book?
Yeah, I have. I haven't read his book, but I've seen him speak and listened to him. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I love it. Like, technology is deflationary, but we live in a system that is by nature inflationary, has to be inflationary for it to survive because it's built on debt. And I'm probably butchering Jeff's coming on the show shortly.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, really, you're really excited about that. He's a pretty, big luminary in the space. Um, and when you get your head around, like, tech should be deflation, we should be going into a world of abundance. We should be having everything becoming cheaper as time goes on, right? With technology lowering, going down to the marginal cost of production, which is getting less and less. That's what it
Yeah.
should be. But we're in a system that's built on debt, and therefore we have to keep refinancing that debt, and we have to keep inflating our way out of it. So when you look at an inflation rate, you're actually coming from a negative, because the technology would be
Yeah.
actually deflationary. It's a lot to get your head around, and I'm still grappling with some of the concepts that Jeff throws out there. And you sort of need to listen to 10 hours of Jeff, and you might grasp it for a second. But
Yeah.
it is a real eye opener and a paradigm shift. When I first got into Bitcoin initially, it was I want to make money, right? I want to be in an asset that's a hard asset and that's going to make money. Now it's a much deeper conversation. It's layer upon layer. The more I explore this, the more I feel like the whole Bitcoin, the architecture, the way it's built, the parallel system, financial system that's been built. And yes, I'm a Bitcoin maxi now. It feels to me like it could save us from the next World War III, and that's probably an exaggeration, but it feels to me like this is our way out of the mess that we are in. I
Yeah,
hope.
look,
I
and
hope.
that is the hope of it. And I'm I'm of the view that if it's not Bitcoin, it'll be related. So Bitcoin still was a Gen 1 technology. It was the first. And was it perfect? Probably not, but it's still doing a bloody good job in my opinion. And so
Mm,
I'm not a maxi in crypto. I'm a pragmatist. I think the technology has a role to play, and
oh yeah.
if it isn't Bitcoin, something like it will solve it. We just need to make sure that it solves it in the right way. Um, the deflationary world we live in, that a large part of that was driven by China. If you have ever been in a situation where you ask yourself, how can I buy a t-shirt for $8?
Mm,
That's the impact of China, the manufacturing scale that they brought. So
inflation, yeah.
that's deflation, because the t-shirt used to be $20 and now it's $8.
Yeah.
Those types of questions, that's the deflationary thing. But as you say, we're living in this world where everything seems to get more expensive. Oh, is it? No, it's not getting any more expensive. The money's worth less. That's
Exactly.
the bit that's going on. And and again, without being a Bitcoin maxi, a lot of people are solving that I know of. There are people online who pay themselves, get paid in fiat currencies, immediately buy Bitcoin for the month. They then, as they're going through the month, they're selling that Bitcoin down to buy, assets or
Yep.
food or
Or
whatever it
food or
is.
whatever. Yeah. But
And
some of it gets left over in the Bitcoin.
some of it gets left over because sometimes there's gains. If you put in $1,000 at the beginning of the month and Bitcoin's still going up and doing what it's doing, you got $1,200. That's how they're doing it.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
That's not for everyone, but it does point to a model where, in terms of this inflation hedge, that our money is worth less. They are solving it for it in a really unique way. And there's a guy who used to work for us, San, who is online regularly on LinkedIn. If you follow him, he's a fantastic source of those. You could used to be able to buy a house for 100 Bitcoin, and
Yeah.
now it's
Now
10.
it's 10.
Now
Yeah.
it's like and he's a young man, so he talks about that stuff in a very different way from me. And we should be grateful for him, because he's a challenger. He's thinking about things for his generation in a different way from my generation. And he's helped the New Zealand crypto ecosystem over a number of years get to where we've gotten to. And so we're all standing on everyone's shoulders to get to
Yeah.
where we've gotten to. We're all trying to affect a change.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're in agreement what that will be, but we're all trying to get somewhere different, and that's the point.
Yeah, and I think, like it'll be interesting to see whether it becomes a currency like
Mm.
San, what was the San's last name? So we can follow
Son Elliot, I think his last name is.
Elliot.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll follow him.
yeah,
If we're all, are we going to be, using it as a currency? So I talked to Jordi Vista about that, and he goes, no, it's not a currency. Then you talk to people like Larry Lepard, and yes, it's going to be a currency. The Lightning Network is developing slowly, but getting
yeah,
there, and the layer twos and layer threes, Nostra and Fediment and other things. And we're going to be able to do, microtransactions first and bigger transactions later. And other people, well, why would you ever spend your Bitcoin for daily expensive? But then if you look at someone like Sam, he is doing that because he's putting his whole wage into Bitcoin, and then from there backing it out again what he
yeah.
needs. The question that pops up in my head about one about that is, I mean, is it going to be a currency? But number two, the tax implications of that. When every transaction is a taxable event, that's what stopped me using crypto as a currency for daily living, like getting a credit card and using it
Yeah.
in the way I would like to use it, because I'd rather be putting into this ecosystem than into the standard ecosystem, because it's inflation and all the other things. But the tax, I don't get my head around the tax.
Yeah, look, tax is complicated, unfortunately, for crypto, and you're right. Everything gets every single
Taxable.
transaction is a taxable event, basically, and that you're not alone in pointing that out as a real impediment to its
So it's
adoption.
currency.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah, to
yeah,
its currency piece.
yeah.
It would be awesome if, because tax is a macro, like a nationwide strategic advantage. Like it's a lever that governments can pull, and it would be awesome if that was factored into that. I would say, as someone who's launched the New Zealand dollar stablecoin, like
Yes.
my view is that stable coins are probably going to be the payment vector for crypto.
So that's not affected by tax when you use, like I haven't
Well,
used the New
New
Zealand
Zealand
dollar
dollar is
stablecoin.
pegged one for one, right? And
Yeah.
so there isn't any gain. There's no forex gain. So the problem with crypto, so say you sell Bitcoin for a US stablecoin, that's one taxable event. But
Yeah.
then the USDT or DC is a different rate from the New Zealand dollar, so you have to do a second taxable event. And so that's what starts to get really complicated. And you've got, so if you're doing your tax compliantly, you have to account for all of that.
Yeah. And it's a nightmare with
Yeah,
Coinly and trying to work that all out, right? So you
correct,
just don't
correct.
do it.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas, if you sold Bitcoin for NZDD, which is our stable coin, NZDD is one for one. So you only have one transaction in that loop. And, through the power, because it's on, cheap fee blockchains like Base and Polygon. So like you can transact with it and
So I
using
can go and buy my coffee with it,
1 cent, right?
and it's
Like
not a
there's
taxable event.
Well, it's one for one, so it would be a taxable event, but the tax would be zero. So, like, it's just that
Right, right, right.
that's how the evolution of the stablecoin market is starting to go, and
Oh.
the stablecoins are ballooning. Like, they are a very exciting part of the ecosystem, along with tokenization.
Yeah, I'm struggling to get my head around. Like everyone's going, stablecoins are going to be massive. This is massive. This is massive. This is bringing the banking structure, and I'm like, how do they work? And I've been focused on USDC and
Yeah.
USDT and not on the New Zealand digital dollar that you've brought to fruition, if you like. So how do we need to be thinking about that? If I want to transact in the New Zealand digital dollar, how do I do that? What do I do?
So, I mean,
And
there's
how
a
do I account for that
Yeah,
tax
like
wise?
there are a few steps to it, and there are companies that are in the ecosystem helping out, and so the one I'm thinking of is a company called Pay It Now, which is a New Zealand-based crypto business. They have two things, so they've got hundreds of merchants that have signed up to accept crypto payments. So there's a little QR code at the checkout,
Wow.
and you can
Yeah,
scan,
yeah.
and you can pay with any crypto. But one of those cryptos that they will accept is our New Zealand dollar stablecoin, NZDD. But they also have a credit card, and I believe it's a prepaid credit card. So you could buy NZDD off us, top up your credit card with them, pay it down. So that's another way of doing it. Globally, stable coins are starting to get a massive amount of recognition because payments payments internationally is,
It's horrifically
man, it's
expensive.
complicated.
Yeah, like
Every
Western Union's going to go under, aren't they?
Oh yeah, I think there's probably some dinosaurs that account, on the chopping
I
block.
hope they do
But
because they're
yeah,
so
yeah, look,
expensive.
but the reality is that every nation does payments slightly differently. You talked about EFTPOS in New Zealand, like we all do. So it's a horrifically complicated space, and then just moving money around is time consuming. Like they're often on what's called T+2. That means to send $100 from New Zealand to the UK, it takes 2 days to clear. Crypto, we can do that in seconds.
Yeah,
And there's these things called corresponding banks, because not every bank can be in a relationship with every bank. That's just not how they work. And so, um, ironically, this makes my head come off. All the big New Zealand banks, if they want to send New Zealand dollars to Australia, say their parent organizations, they have to go through an intermediary that's a US bank.
oh my gosh,
Yeah, like
I didn't
it's
know that.
crazy. Like they don't go New Zealand dollar to, Sydney. They go New Zealand dollars to some bank in Chicago, and Chicago back to Sydney.
Oh
Like
my
so
gosh.
so like when you get your head around that, you can see why there is cost and delay and all that sort of stuff. And stable coins live on these blockchains, which enable us to do point-to-point transactions. So immediate settlement, very low fees, and I can see on the blockchain. So if I was sending you $100, I can see when it's there, like me, not waiting for the bank to confirm that it's there, like
Yeah,
me. And
this is
so,
gold.
and you can be anywhere in the world, and we can do that transaction. And so that's the real power of stablecoins. And yes, they are. They are representations of an asset that is devaluing, but you do have we have to have, again, we can't deal with change mentally. It's the problem.
We can't just flip to
Yeah,
a
yeah. And
Bitcoin
so,
standard. No,
well, having markers, reference rates are really important to us. Even when we talk about the price of Bitcoin, it's against the
US
US
dollar.
dollar.
Yeah.
Not many people go, Bitcoin to Ethereum or whatever it is. Not many people talk about those rates. So we do have these references in our head. As an issuer of a New Zealand dollar stablecoin, like we're of the belief that, when I go to the gas station, I go to the supermarket, I don't want to be buying things in US currency. So
No,
having a local currency marker is really important to me. And so, that's, the future of that coin. And, it's going to be a long burn, but that's where we see that kind of going. We also see foreign exchange markets. You talk about Western Union in terms of remittances. Those types of markets are really, really inefficient. They're costly. And sadly, the people who can afford it the least get penalized the
exactly.
most.
Sending money
If you're
home
if
to
you're JP Morgan moving money around, you pay, less than way less than 1%. I don't know what it is, but it'll be way less than 1%. But if I'm a RCE worker sending money back to people who desperately need it, I'll lose 5-8%.
exactly. It's huge. So
So,
this is
you
going to
know,
go with
yeah,
stable
yeah.
coins.
And so that's the kind of stuff that stablecoins are going to look to solve. And it's not just us, there's a bunch of people getting into that industry now. Some of the payment giants in the world are getting into it. PayPal,
Hmm.
Stripe, who, most people have checked out
Yeah,
using Stripe.
you went to their conference, didn't you?
I did. It was amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
it
I
was
watched it
amazing.
online, like some of their keynotes and
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
and insane.
Yeah, AI and stablecoins were everything they talked about. And being in Silicon Valley, so San Francisco is enlightening. Like they are just getting on with it. We're not waiting for the government. We're not, they are just getting on with it. And they're a privately owned company, and they can get on and do some. And they come across
Huge.
the two Collison brothers who run Stripe come across as very, very smart.
Yeah, totally.
I'm sure they're surrounded by smart people, but they came across as very, very smart, and they're just getting into it. And he or she who executes is going to be the winner in that space, and they're getting on with it, which is outstanding. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I use Stripe all the time with my Shopify sites
yep,
and my,
yep, yep,
in my apps that I've developed. That they're all Stripe.
yep.
It is. And so they have a viewpoint into what's actually happening in the industry. They
Yeah,
gave examples of some of the AI vibe coding, was it Replit or Cursor or
yep,
something,
yep,
ARR, to some ridiculous amount within 9 months, like never seen before in the
yep.
history of humanity that they're growing so fast.
Yeah, and the same's true with stablecoins. I mean, they in the conference they didn't put the scale up, but they showed Stripe growth versus stablecoin adoption in their business, and like it's chalk and
Wow.
cheese. Like so, they can see the wave. It's not just a ripple; it's a wave, and they're getting into it in terms of moving money around. Some of it's in partnership. Mastercard and Visa stablecoins did more volume than Mastercard and Visa combined last year.
Mm.
No
Right.
surprises, Mastercard and Visa are now into the stablecoin game. Like they
Yeah,
can
well, they
see.
have to be. It's survival.
Well, yeah,
Same with
and
PayPal.
exactly. And for us in the stablecoin industry, it solves the challenge around that last mile bit because you're familiar with credit cards. You're okay with tapping and going and pins and all
Mm.
that sort of stuff. And so if you can use them as vehicles to
Existing.
get the
Yep.
payment bit done, like we're happy with that. It's a step in the right direction. Is it the end game? I don't think it is, but it's a step. And so that's a part of it. Um,
Do you see any risk, with USDT, these being companies and it's a representation of the dollar that's behind it. Do you
yeah.
see any risk with that, having
Oh,
your
look,
like storing your
like
wealth in there?
yeah, look, there with concentration does come a risk, and we are concentrated around two, let's be honest, two big US stablecoins, Circle USDC and Tether USDT. They are 90 something percent of the stablecoin market collectively. And so, yeah, we do have a concentration risk there. There's been runs, so Circle, it was widely known, Circle was banked by Silvergate, and when Silvergate went under, there was a retail run, and so it depegged a little bit at the retail level. So instead of being worth $1, it was worth, I don't know, 97 cents, 98 cents. Not great, but that was at a retail level. If you got to Circle, they're still taking it 1-to-1, right? So sometimes you just got to let the market settle down and do its thing. So yes, there is a concentration risk there a little bit. Crypto is dominated by a few big exchanges as well. Binance is
Yeah.
on that list. It's a
Yep.
concentration risk. So it's a function of a pretty, we've still only been going for 10, 15 years. And a lot of those companies we're talking about are only 5 years old. So,
Yeah.
the industry is still pretty young. And so yes, it is a function of its growth curve. And so, yeah, we do have some concentration risk. When we get to tokenization, I have no doubt we will have concentration risk. There'll be a few companies that are doing the
Yeah. Robinhood and
tokenization. There'll be
yeah.
companies like Securitize who've been doing it for years, and there's a couple of
Wow.
outfits in Singapore who I know have been doing it for years. I don't whether it's them, but somebody will emerge quite dominant in that space, and
Yeah.
then distribution. So who's actually selling it will concentrate. BlackRock's already got a head start on some of it, whether it's
Mm.
Idle Fund. Um, the it will, and so yeah, we'll end up with these concentrated pockets of technology doing that. But somebody's got to be first, and then it will do. It will concentrate, and then it will democratize. That's how markets work.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully that will democratize a little bit, and
Yeah.
and then you get bad actors. Like we were unfortunately hit with that whole Celsius debacle.
Yep.
Was it 2 years ago?
Yep.
Along with 6 million other people, and that was huge. And FTX, of course, there
Yep.
was, there's been some bad players, and so the whole industry is still finding its feet, and that's why I'm really glad that we're getting some regulatory clarity
Yeah.
about what is allowed, what isn't allowed. Mashinsky was acting like a bank when he didn't have all the
Yep.
things, unbeknownst to us, and it's made me more cautious now.
Yep.
And luckily we weren't hit by like some people were hit, but it like I'm waiting for the day and we can borrow against our Bitcoin, right? And we can actually do that in a safe manner. Like I'm not
Yep.
touching that stuff now, not after what we experienced with Celsius.
Yep.
But as someone who believes in where this is going, I don't want to sell my Bitcoin ever, but I've also got to live now, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
this, do you see any structural changes or products that are being developed that are going to become safe enough
Yeah.
for us to do that?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, as bad as those events were, FTX and Celsius and a few others, they were the wake up call that one the regulators and the industry needed. And out of any great disaster, there's always some benefit, and one of
Mhm.
those was one, transparency around holdings, and two, good processes. And you saw some flow on from that. Binance US was regulated, and CZ went to jail for a small period of time because of some bad practices, and those bad practices are ironed out. Will they ever disappear? Well, no. And I can
You're
say
always
that
going to have
with,
bad actors.
well, I can
Yeah.
say that with a degree of authority because JP Morgan gets fined every year for AML breaches, and so does Citibank, and so
And so
does,
does Pfizer in the medical
they
world, or
like we
no.
so it won't be perfect, but it will be a
No.
bloody side better, a good
Yeah.
side better, and that's a really important part of it. And the lessons from those things will permeate through time, and we're seeing that now. Not in New Zealand, but in Australia, there's an organisation now that is doing Bitcoin loans for housing and Bitcoin,
Yes, I saw that.
and they've had a long run battle with what's called ASIC over there, which is
Yeah.
the Australian SEC effectively, and won their court case.
Wow.
Um,
Is
uh,
they taking the keys though? Like you, not your keys, not your crypto. They're still taking the keys for
Correct,
the, yeah,
correct. And so, you need to do your research on who the custodian is underneath and how that's working. But, that's, regionally very close. And there's a bunch of people doing that around the world now, in various different ways.
yeah. You got
And those different ways are largely dictated by tax treatment, in certain jurisdictions. If I move money from my wallet into my bank account, that's not a disposable event. I put $100 from my wallet, my physical wallet, into my bank account. But ironically, if I move Bitcoin from my crypto wallet into a lending institution, that is a disposable event. That doesn't feel
yeah.
quite right. And
No.
I know that's a big discussion at the moment within inland revenue because they're going, no, you must maintain key control. I'm like, what? In my head, I'm like, well, what's actually changed in those two scenarios? So, this is my point in that, some of these things are dictated by the rules of the land that they're launched in. And so the systems and the securities and the processes are driven by the rules of their land. And oftentimes that's tax optimization rolls into that as well. So look, there are emerging solutions out there. There is a really cool company in New Zealand called Everlasting, which is doing estate planning. And what that means is they've figured out a way for Ethereum at the minute, but Ethereum to be passed on intergenerationally. So if I die and no one knows how to access my crypto, there's a problem for my
Yeah.
family.
Huge.
So
Yeah.
if but in the I'm talking about their solution, but they've got a multi-sig solution that means that an independent third party can reestablish the key and your family can get access to your crypto wealth
That's
in
brilliant. I'll look
that
into
case.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they I know they spend a lot of time working with inland revenue and their professional service body to get a binding ruling. And in that case, it's not a disposable event, and they've actually ruled that crypto is being used for a different purpose. So it's not the intent wasn't to buy and sell, and so therefore you get different tax treatment on that portion of your crypto, and is my understanding. And so
Well,
again, this is my point is that it is
complex.
evolving. It is evolving, and
Mm.
those guys have created a clever solution for the New Zealand market for Ethereum.
Oh, I'll be checking
Um,
them out.
yeah,
Yeah.
so so again, it is rapidly evolving, and it's certainly something that I know SwiftX, who is an Australian-based business, is certainly paying close attention to as well, because that is the future. Because one of the challenges we always get with crypto is, well, what do I do with it?
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
and
You want to
and
live
and
and
well, exactly. And or I've got a lot of it, but I don't want to pay 33 or 40% tax. Or what do I
exactly.
do with it? And I'm like, well, at the moment we're waiting for some cool stuff to arrive, but
Mm.
we can see the cool stuff is arriving in other markets quite close to us, and I think it won't, in a matter of time it'll get here for us.
Yeah, can't wait for the day when we can borrow against the Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form
Hmm.
to finance. So we don't, you don't want to sell your, increasing in value asset to take a fiat currency that's going down, right? But
Correct.
you need to also live in the fiat currency world
Yeah.
to pay your bills because they won't take directly. But you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, so you'd rather borrow against it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Bitcoin keeps rising and it will pay itself off. And just like the old families, they always use the example of if you bought a building in Manhattan in the 18th century, those families just borrow against that asset. They
Yeah.
never have to work again in their lives because the value is going up and up and up. And so in theory, that's what we'll be able to do hopefully in the future.
Yeah. Look,
Um,
I'm excited for that future because,
Yeah,
and I
me
know it looks a
too.
lot like the old financial system, but it's kind of a hybrid. And I think that's, part of the change. And, you know, that's just the journey that we're on at an industry level. And again, like I talked a little bit about tokenization in this pod. So, tokenization is going to be pretty exciting. There's 3 or 4 companies in New Zealand doing quite a lot of work about tokenized real estate. So that's,
Yep. Wow.
taking a property, fractionalizing it up into however many units, call it 100, and you can buy 10 and I can buy 10, and we can build a house, and then someone, all of that sort of stuff.
It's gold. Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
tokenizing gold. They're already tokenizing money market funds, which are generally the preserve of really big enterprises. We can't get access to them. But if they tokenize it, we can. Robinhood came out with tokenized Tesla
Yeah.
stocks. Didn't Tesla
And
didn't like it.
SpaceX
Yeah, yeah,
and
and all that sort of stuff.
all that. Yeah.
So, giving access to alternate assets is a big part of the tokenization dream, and I think that's really, really exciting. And I say that because we wrote a blog, I think it was this week, we put it out, where when we look at what the very high net worth families are doing, they kind of invest like us, except for 2 big things. One, they think about it in a time horizon that's massive, like they think intergenerationally. And two, their allocation into alternate assets. So not just crypto, but gold and wines and private investments in companies is higher. Those are the 2 defining characteristics of people who are way, way wealthier. Like they're not one percenters, they're 0.1 percenters. That's what they do. And so if we can use the wonders of blockchain to provide access to these traditionally shut off markets, these
Yeah.
illiquid markets, then that's
Yeah. Like you couldn't buy a Picasso, right? But you might
correct.
be able to buy a piece of a
Yeah.
Picasso
Yeah.
via
Really nice way of saying
tokenization.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. And so, there's a bunch of people all around the world working on various projects around doing that. And the hope is that, as you said, we'll all move on from just the S&P 500. We'll move into different asset classes, which have got different risk and return profiles. And you're going to have to do your research and understand what it is and all that sort of stuff. So there's a little bit of work involved,
Yep.
but you will be able to get into assets that you can't at the minute, which is quite exciting.
And especially when there's so many really cool brand new private companies that are coming up, like to take your likes of ChatGPT, you can't invest in those companies, right? Unless
Yeah,
you're in the venture capital world and somebody, somebody. But we in future might be able to do that and,
yeah,
and partly can do it. I mean, I know Vlad from Robin Hood is very much going in that direction to be able to tokenize everything
correct.
and fractionalize everything. And this opens up huge opportunities. One more question, Paul, before I let you wrap up, because I could talk to you for hours. So many questions that I have. What's your take on cold storage versus say buying an IBIT, BlackRock's ETF versus say a MicroStrategy, and what is also the dangers to the Bitcoin space or the crypto space when you have concentrations, when you got someone like Salo who's got, I don't know, 5-6% of the entire Bitcoin, thing eventually. Are there risks because this was a decentralized asset
Yeah,
class do you see any risk factors when the governments, like if the US government who's talking about buying 1 million Bitcoin possibly in the next few years, whether they manage it, I don't know.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
know Cynthia Lummis's goal is to do that. When you get big governments coming in and you get the likes of sailors coming in, what's the risk for the whole structure of the
Yeah.
decentralization?
Well, look at there's 2 things there. So when we're talking about cold storage and all that sort of stuff, like security, if you're hanging on to your crypto, you need to become aware of crypto security. And for me, cold storage, if I'm a self-sovereign holder of my
Yeah,
wealth, cold storage is the high bar.
yeah.
And the obvious question I get asked a lot is, well, how much? And I'm like, when you get to a point in time when your crypto holdings, if you lost it, it would make you cry, and you'd be really upset. Then you've got to secure it with the best technology, and for me, that's cold storage, and it's
Mm.
Trezors or Nanos
Yep.
or those sorts of technologies. ETFs, look, ETFs are doing a fantastic job of making crypto available to a bunch of people who probably
Yeah.
weren't.
Otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so as a purist, not ideal, but as someone who's big on the sector, it's there. They come with their own benefits around and hiccups around tax and all that sort of stuff, and so you need to do your research around that. Ironically, they are driving concentration. Those are the most successful ETFs on the planet.
Yeah.
And
In
underneath
history.
underneath them is several 100,000 Bitcoin, which is sitting in a custody arrangement run by Circle. So yes, we are
Wow.
concentrating, and
Yeah.
yes, say Michael Saylor with strategy is concentrating stuff as well. Does that represent a risk? I don't think the ETFs represent a risk because there's multiple retail investors on there. But I think, Saylor is getting to a point in time where he probably is. And what, the doomsday scenario would be he gets rolled as chairman, the board then loses Bitcoin religion and they start selling the Bitcoin or whatever. There's something there. And they've got, we recently, I think as recently as 2 weeks ago, a Satoshi area person sold
Yeah.
80,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
market soaked it up, right? So we can soak up huge volumes. That's
Yeah.
nine
There's
or 10,
demand now, but
9 or 10
still.
billion, right? So
Yeah.
it's a big number, but we couldn't in one fell swoop soak up everything that Sailor's got. And so, you know, but it doesn't, you think about that, it doesn't make sense for them economically to dump. Like they're going to do it very intelligently. They're going,
And certainly Salem
so,
himself wouldn't,
but it
if he
does,
died or if he,
yeah, but we are concentrating in certain parts of the market. But what I
yeah,
would say is, in Bitcoin terms, I think we're at 19 million and 100,000 Bitcoins are mined out of the
yeah.
21 million, something like that.
And
I might
plenty
be,
are lost too.
yeah. Well, plenty are lost, but it's one of the first assets, probably the first assets where it was held by retail users like you. And we still have power in that ecosystem.
Yeah,
So, and what's incredible is, you know, I know the price. You don't have to buy a full Bitcoin. You can buy, like to the $50 of a Bitcoin, you can still get the same benefits. And so, as an asset class, it's one of those things that we're talking about that has been largely restricted to the uber rich, and now, for the first time, it's open to the market. So I
yeah,
think that's pretty exciting, and we can still see on chain the lion's share of Bitcoin and other crypto is owned by retail traders.
retail. Let's
And
go.
it's fantastic, and we should be a foil to the big business part of it and act accordingly and do what we want, right?
Well,
Like,
we've certainly front run the institutions, which is the first time in our history that we've managed to
correct,
do
right?
that.
No, and so like the people who are selling, so on every trade there's a seller and
Yeah,
there's a buyer, and the people who are selling to the institutions, and they're not selling it. Traditionally you don't sell at a loss, right? So my hope is that they've made gains.
we're getting,
And if you got Bitcoin at $10 and you're selling it at 110,000
yeah,
to the ETS, well done. Like that's a W, right? So, would I like you to hang on? Of course I would. But everyone's got a number, and that part of it is to change your lot in life. And if it changes your lot in life, well done. Um, Equally, you and I can still go online, Easy Crypto, multiple other places, and get access to this wonderful asset class and get the same benefits as these big institutions at the same
yeah,
prices,
yeah, yeah.
right?
I
That's
love
that's
it
the
that,
incredible bit, right? There's no middleman, there's no like front run, there's no like um, you know, there's no issuance at a tenth of the value because you're an early investor. It's the same price. It's a globally discoverable price asset, and so that's a pretty cool place to be. And so I don't know if the concentration risk worries me. They are big businesses who do things really, really well, in terms of their security and all that sort of stuff. So that doesn't particularly worry me. I just think, retailers and traders like you need to just keep at it because you are the power.
yeah, we are the decentralized
Yeah,
power.
yeah.
But like in a doomsday scenario again, like say in 3 years' time or 3.5 years' time, and the US government changes back into an anti-crypto world, and Elizabeth Warren gets in or something. Um, God forbid. If that was to happen and they were to undo everything, they could actually, like theoretically, they could say to IBIT, hey, pay everybody out, here's the cash, give us the Bitcoin.
Yeah, they could, but I mean, politics is a game of being liked. And I think the Democrats learnt in the last election that attacking an asset class that something like 25 or 30% of Americans owned didn't work for them.
Dumb.
Yeah, and so
He's still yelling
and
though.
exactly right. But in 3 years' time, there'll be more people who've got exposure through their version of KiwiSaver 401ks because they're all investing in the S&P and now strategies on the S&P and circles on the S&P and Coinbase is on the so that the the scale of the industry will mean they can't, like in my opinion, they can't
We
completely
can't do
unwind
that.
it. Can they
That's
make it
right.
more difficult? Yeah, they can do that. But you know what? Like, it is still a global asset class. And it's one of my pet peeves that 5% of the world's population, which is the US, still dictates things the way they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if America does become a bit colder on it, like somebody will be friendly. It could be the UK, it could be Singapore, it could be us, and so that's the whole value of it. It's internet money. So, really, as long as the internet is running, like we can keep doing what we're doing and, America can go backwards. Your choice.
And it slows the thing down, but it won't stop it.
It
I mean,
won't kill it, right?
governments can slow it. I mean, China's tried to ban it.
Yeah,
Many of these countries have tried to ban it. India's tried to. The UK's made it difficult for people. And at the end of the day, they can't. And people do vote with their feet. They leave the country sometimes,
yeah, they
even
do. Yep,
if they can't get access. And so you start losing. You're seeing out of the UK not just because of crypto now, but because of some of their stupid tax laws that the billionaires are leaving the
yep,
UK, the millionaires, the multimillionaires, the rich people are leaving in droves the UK.
correct.
Like, hello, that's what happens, when you start to tax the rich, what they say. Yeah, you've got to think of that. It's all well and good. It makes sense in a very basic model, but it doesn't work like that because they're the people that run the businesses. They're the people that create the
Yeah.
productivity, and they're the ones that are employing the people. When they leave your country, then you're in trouble.
And we live in a hypermobile time. Like it's very easy to
Yeah.
relocate to
Dubai
a
or
tax
something like
friendly
that.
jurisdiction,
Yeah.
and people are happy to do that.
Yep.
So you know, action and reaction. There is always a reaction, and some of them are unintended.
Yeah.
So and the UK is not alone. Like I think one of the Nordic countries brought in a wealth tax, and they're seeing all of their
Lost
billionaires
everybody.
move on. So it's there's probably enough evidence. Again, this is my point. There's always evidence because New Zealand's fantastic at being a follower. There's always evidence that says maybe you should have a think about this stuff.
Yeah.
So
Maybe you should run for parliament, Paul.
I've got the right haircut for it apparently, but um,
Too good looking.
yeah,
Can't you
yeah,
can't you
yeah.
can't you couldn't survive in there.
Yeah, I'm not sure my personality type would do well in politics. So
You certainly wouldn't, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah,
But we do need leaders like you that have an understanding of the technology because when you have and to be fair, how the hell can they all have the breadth of the knowledge that you have in this technology? Like it's pretty impossible. When you have people like that making the regulations who don't understand the technology that they're regulating, that's dangerous, and that's where we're at. And
yeah,
it's the same actually in the medical world. Like
yeah,
to me, it's like this is really crucial. There's people's lives on the line, there's people's livelihoods on the line, the future of the country's on the line. You need to have good advice from good people. So hopefully people are listening to people like you and the blockchain council and the
yeah,
key people in this infrastructure. And little things like this podcast, it's meant to educate. It's meant to make people aware and start to go, oh, I didn't know that. I might think about, might dive into it a little bit more, and so we're all doing our little part is to try to open this up to people.
yeah. Well,
Um,
and that's part of it, right? And Blockchain New Zealand does spend a lot of time and effort working with regulators and banks and all that sort of stuff, just trying to lift its profile of the sector and educate the regulators who are making some decisions. And we have a fantastic regulatory environment. Like they are so available to us. Like we just don't appreciate it. So there is a lot of really good people trying to do good things with good intent. And we should make the most of the access we have and do the things that we can to continue to do that across all of our fields. Will they listen to everything? No, it's politics, right? They're working on populist opinion and all that sort of stuff. But it doesn't mean we can't keep trying.
No, and keep inching your way forward.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you so much. I'd really love to interview you again in 6 months' time when we've got more stuff happening, and
Awesome.
maybe dive deeper into the world of AI, because we didn't really get there. I got so much please, if you know anyone else that you think would be good for the show, that because I want New Zealand. I have a lot of American contacts, but I want some New Zealand people that are in the space here.
Yeah.
Because we need to understand how it affects here, and not just
Agreed.
in the American world. So
Yeah.
pass me along, will you?
Yeah, will do. Thank you very much for having me. It was lovely to chat.
Absolutely wonderful.